joining us now on Open Book. Even though you haven't written a book yet, Sawhill, I believe that you will write one in the future, but you are writing something called the Curiosity Chronicle. It's a great newsletter. There's a little bit of Ben Franklin in that newsletter. You're an investor, an entrepreneur, and a creator, and I'm a fan of yours. And so I brought you on the podcast. And your Twitter feed, I've done a little bit of research on you. Your Twitter feed has hit around 1.1 billion impressions in 2022, which is huge, by the way. So congratulations on that. But talk us through your journey. How did you manage to pull that together? And why are you the philosopher guru?
Well, I definitely wouldn't consider myself a philosopher guru. I appreciate the hype track, though. You got to let me know where I have to Venmo you or whatever later for the hype. I can bring you around with me more often.
It's a very expensive Venmo.
I know. I imagine. I'll buy you a dinner or something. No, I mean, look, it's been a sort of labor of love, I suppose. Over, I guess, 2 years ago, I started the writing, started sharing things publicly. This is like right in the middle of COVID. COVID hit, and I mean, your life changed a lot when COVID hit, I'm sure. And like everyone else, mine did. I went from, I was working in finance. I was working in like a pretty traditional investing role, working 80 to 100-hour weeks, traveling 3-4 days a week, pretty miserable, like head down type stuff. And all of a sudden I was stuck at home and had nothing else to do. I wasn't traveling. I couldn't see my friends. I couldn't really do much of anything, couldn't travel, see family, etc. And so I was trying to figure out what to do with all that time that I all of a sudden had on my hands. And I'm not into like video games. I'm not into, I don't know, whatever stuff kids are doing these days to blow hours. And so for me, it was writing. And right around that time was when, like, you remember this, but markets were going like up, and to the right, but the economy was literally shut down. People were stuck at home. There was no jobs. And for some reason, the market was crushing it. And I had all these friends, played baseball, and I had all these baseball friends who weren't from finance backgrounds that were asking me, what the fuck is going on? Excuse my language. Like, how's the market soaring like this when, when the economy is shut down? And so I started realizing there's this massive gap in education that exists in our country where, basic information about about the financial economy is not getting disseminated in a way that people understand. And so that was how it originally started, was I was going to share, simple layman's term, digestible explanations of things that were happening in the world. And it was generally around the market, finance, economy at the time. And over time, it expanded to be, much broader, as you say, around philosophy, life, etc.
So you're a Capricorn like Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin was a big philosopher. Of course, my favorite Ben Franklin book is not Poor Richard's Almanac. You want to hear what my favorite Ben Franklin book is?
What is it?
Okay, let me just ask somebody here. What's my favorite Ben Franklin book?
I know the answer, but...
Okay, my favorite Ben Franklin book is Fart Proudly.
I've never read that.
Okay, you see, I'm educating you here. Okay, so go look up on Amazon, Fart Proudly.
Yeah.
That is Ben's seminal work, and I think it was a life-changing book for me because, Ben was a big-time farter, and he didn't take his life seriously, and he farted proudly. And so the book is The Writings of Benjamin Franklin You Never Read in School. And, of course, there's a very famous scene in Walter Isaacson's book where the Continental Congress is too cheap to pay for 2 boarding rooms in France, while they're trying to lure General Lafayette over to help them with the Revolutionary War. So John Adams and Ben Franklin are in the room together, and it's a winter night in Paris, and Franklin is ripping farts, and Adams is super pissed at him and decides to open the window and catches cold, and he blames his cold on Ben Franklin. And so Mr. Franklin thought that was funny, and so he wrote a book called Fart Proudly, that he was very proud of the things that came out of his bottom side. Okay, but you are like a philosopher like Ben Franklin, but yet you're a very young man. So where is the philosophy coming from? Is it coming from you being a man of letters, that you're a great reader and writer? Is it coming from what? What's it coming from? Your parents? What's it coming from?
I would say there's a couple things. First and foremost, I don't consider anything that I'm doing to be teaching people. I don't consider any of it to be particular, degree of wisdom. What I do consider it to be is lived experience, and I'm sharing it in real time. So I think a lot of history's great philosophers and people that you talk about, Benjamin Franklin as an example, most of them wrote about all these things much later in life. Like, right, they were much older and they were reflecting back on their experience and writing about it. What I'm trying to do, and what I'm doing with my newsletter or with different things I'm writing, is taking people along my journey and my personal struggle with all of these things that I'm writing about. So none of it is me saying like, I have learned these things, I'm so much smarter, and here's what I know now. It's, hey, I've wrestled with this thing in real time, or I am wrestling with this. Being a new parent is a great example of all of these new things that I'm experiencing from being a first-time father that are leading to a lot of interesting insights on life and how we think about time and the passage of it. And I'm sharing that in real time with people. So there's not really, some feeling from me that I'm sharing some amazing, wisdom or philosophy as this like elder statesman by any means. It's much more so sharing my journey and sharing my struggle, hopefully with personality along the way that allows people to feel like they can connect with it in a real way.
Okay. So, connect with me. Tell me what I should be learning from Sahil Bloom.
I mean, for you, you're probably wrestling with something that, a lot of people are today, which is time. And it's been one of the concepts that I've been writing about and really focused on recently, because I think it applies universally, no matter what age you are today, no matter what ethnicity, where you're from, all of these things. We all have the exact same time, right? Where it's ticking and it's going away and you're never going to get it back. And so thinking about your time, thinking about who you spend your time with, thinking about whether you should be trading your time for those, extra dollars, or should you be focusing it on X, Y, or Z that's more important to you? Maybe spending time with your kids, spending time with your wife, etc. Those questions are universal. And so wrestling with those and asking the right questions about how you think about your time, I would say is, something you should definitely be thinking about, as well as everyone else that's out there.
So what should I be thinking?
So I shared these graphs recently that I think are a good way to summarize this whole idea. It was looking at the American Time Use Survey. So data from Americans on how we spend our time over the course of our lives. It's this, longitudinal survey. It's really robust and an incredible data set. And I made these graphs that came out of it that were basically showing who you spend your time with over the course of your life. So at different ages, how many hours per week or hours per day are you spending with your parents? Are you spending with your partner? Are you spending with your coworkers, your children, alone, etc.? And it's really powerful when you look at the data actually visualized, because what you see is that basically the amount of time you're spending with your parents falls off an absolute cliff after you leave the house after age 18. You basically aren't spending any time with them the rest of your life. Same thing with your friends, kind of peaks around like early 20s and then slowly declines over the course of your life. Coworkers spikes, and you end up spending a ton of time with your coworkers over the course of your life. Time with your partner basically rises until one of you dies. And then time alone is the only one that steadily increases throughout your entire life. You just spend more and more time alone. There's this loneliness epidemic, etc. And then the last one was children, which is a really challenging one for a lot of people to see, because you basically spend most of your time with them over their kind of growing up years, and then you don't get to spend time with them the rest of your life. And so when you see this data visualized, I think it brings to the fore this whole idea of like, how do you bend these curves? Who do you want to be spending your time with? Who are the people that really matter to you? The important friendships, the relationship with your parents. How many times are you going to see your parents before they die? There's these incredible questions that you need to start asking yourself if you want to make changes in your life and you want to start prioritizing the things that really do matter to you.
Okay. Are you a physicist? Do you study physics?
Not formally. I think the last time I took a physics class was in high school. Why?
Well, because there's a couple of theories about time, which are, fascinating theories. I mean, one of the theories is that, does it actually exist? Or are we actually ourselves in a time machine where we're synthesizing information from the universe that looks like it's sequential? But is Richard Feynman or Albert Einstein correct that all of time has happened at the same time, but yet for whatever reason, the way our bodies are programmed, and of course, Elon Musk has once said he'd love to meet the person that's software designed our personalities, because there's so many things about our personalities that we ourselves don't fully understand. You know,
Are you a believer in the simulation? Like, do you think that we're living in a simulation?
I don't know if we're living in a simulation or not, but I think it would be impossible to say that we're not living in a simulation any more than it's possible to say that we are. I'm not a, you know, I'm one of these weirdos where I take in every theory and, you know, I'm willing to examine them. There are atheists that believe that there's no creator, if you will, there's no God. Then there are deists who believe that there's a God, but there's no religion. You know, and so on and so forth. I'm a practicing Roman Catholic, so I'm probably more jaded to believe and be predisposed towards the teachings of my church, but that's me, you know, and that's probably the way I got raised by my strict Italian American grandmother. But having said that, I'm open to reincarnation. I'm open to thoughts about time. But you're saying something that's interesting, and I just want to test this on you. If I have a book here, let's say I open this book. And, oh, look at this. It happens to be one of my books. Look at that. Okay. So I have a book here and the end of the book has already been completed. And so is the beginning of the book. But where I start the book and start reading, time is elapsing between the beginning and the end. Yet it's all already happened. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a physical theory. That's a law of physics that Einstein and Feynman believe to be true. What's your reaction to that?
You're bending me here. I don't know what my reaction is to that. I honestly, like, I don't really have I don't have a perspective on the theoretical construct around time here.
All right, let me flip something back at you. You know, it's just interesting because, you know, you are an out of the box thinker, and there's a lot of contemporary thought to your personality as well. So what is it about your writing style and your philosophical tenets that has grabbed your generation? Don't be modest.
No,
be observant, be realistic.
I mean, the most interesting thing to me, it actually came. So I'm writing a book currently. You mentioned this at the outset that I might be working on something. I signed a big book deal in September of last year. So I'm kind of in the early process of writing a book with Penguin Random House. And one of the interesting things that came out of that process was my agency did a whole kind of demographic profile of my subscriber base and the people that are following me. And my assumption was that it was going to be a lot of like 20 to 30-year-olds, you know, a lot of people who were like early in life, you know, hustling, wanting career hacks, get ahead, etc. And the reality was it was actually like 35 to 55 was my biggest demographic by a long shot.
Okay.
And what jumped out to me about that was that I think it's a lot of people who are sort of entering that like middle phase of their life, which is what I am in now. I think I've entered it at a slightly earlier point than most people do these days by virtue of the fact that I married my high school sweetheart and we got married young and had a baby pretty young by current constructs, etc. But I think that that journey is what has connected with people. And most of my growth has come while I've been on that journey. It wasn't me like in my, you know, early finance day, hustle culture, bro life, sharing like, yo, I'm working 100-hour weeks, you know, get the coffee, whatever, like fire me up, etc. That wasn't the type of stuff I was sharing. What I've been sharing is my journey basically since I decided to quit my job and go all in on this more personal, you know, set of pursuits and entrepreneurial journey and pursue something that's altogether really different and pursue alongside building a family and hopefully building a more balanced life. So I think that is what is connecting with people. It's that, you know, slightly more dynamic and slightly more journey oriented personality that's coming across in the things that I'm sharing.
You know, I look at your threads and I love your threads and I love the way you think about life. How is your generation, because you're young enough to be my son, how is your generation going to view success? And I'll just say plaintively, and you can agree or disagree with me, I grew up in the, you know, elementary school in the 70s, formal education in the 80s, meaning college and law school, and the 90s, which was fairly robust boomer materialism and consumerism. So the 80s and 90s were robust consumerists, if you will. So we view our success, whether we like it or not, through our materiality. Will that be true for your generation? Again, I'm making a bold
No.
editorial statement. That's my observation of my generation.
No, I think this generation is characterized by low attention and the inability to hold focus over a long period of time. And I think a lot of that is driven by the fact that we're the social media generation. We live in a generation where technology has programmed us to jump from thing to thing very quickly and to be unable to hold our focus for a long period of time. And we all feel it, right? When we sit on social media or we spend time on these different platforms trying to build our personal brands, that's eating into us. It's hitting you with the dopamine drip over and over again. You lose your ability to actually focus for a long period of time, to be in that deep work state, etc. And I think about it a lot. I think it's a generation that we live in that is entirely focused on the prize and not nearly enough on the process. I say this all the time. The person who loves climbing is going to climb a whole lot higher than the person who loves the summit. And there's a huge difference between those two people. And I think social media is training an entire generation of people to only focus on the summit. It's focusing on the like count. It's focusing on the follower count. It's focusing on all of those little things that sit out there, the dopamine hits that are sitting out there, rather than focusing on loving punching the clock. The person who loves that climb and actually loves climbing. I think about it all the time. My grandfather, when I was a kid, telling me that there was pride to be taken in punching the clock every single day, in showing up to work, no matter what it was you were doing, by the way. I mean, now we have this thing where we just like to glorify this like one type of work and it's sexy and it looks good. Well, what I was always taught as a kid is that like my grandfather on my dad's side was, or great grandfather on my dad's side was a vegetable peddler in New York. And he showed up every single day, 5 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever time you had to get there to go get the vegetables, drag your cart out, etc. And he took so much pride in just punching the clock every single day. And I think with social media and what these technology systems and what the constant dopamine drip have done to us is we've lost an ability to really punch the clock and take pride in it in that deep way.
I mean, I think it's well said. I want to add something. I want to test your reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
So the generation before me and my grandparents, the World War II generation, many of these people were involved with the military or had family members in the military. And with the military, you get structure and the military gives you command and control. It also created some level of comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, in the country. Mm-hmm. Where somebody like George McGovern, a left-leaning senator, could get along with Bob Dole, a right-leaning senator, even though they disagreed on a lot of policy because they were connected through the American military. You also saw the advent of the Mad Men world, which was by and large command control, sort of the Sinclair Lewis, man in the gray flannel suit business idea. The IBMs of the world, General Electric, these large corporations, GM. You then morphed as you got into the 90s, as we started to move away from the military. Less and less of our people were involved in the American military, down to like 2% now. In the same time that was happening, we got all these choices, social media choices, cable television choices, reaffirmation of our own biases. So now we're all tunneled into our own places. Do you think that we've lost some level of our community? Do you think your generation is going to struggle with that tribalism?
Yes, absolutely. I think the common cause, losing your common cause is a really impactful thing. The movie Independence Day is something that I always think about in kind of a funny context, I suppose, of like the alien invasion is coming and, Will Smith has his whole heroic thing going on in that movie. But the whole idea was that the entire planet comes together for this common cause of, avoiding extinction by this alien enemy. And I've long thought that the only thing that would ever bring us together is an alien invasion that brings together all of humanity to fight against this common foe. More recently, I think we would all just argue over, what to call the aliens, and we'd probably just get wiped out immediately because I don't see our ability to actually come together around common cause. I think the aliens would come and be like ready to blow us up with their big laser beam. And we would somehow be like squabbling over whether it was like calling it a spaceship or should we call it a UFO or what should we call this thing that's up there? And they would be zapping us and killing us. So I do think we've lost our ability to some extent to circle around a common cause, and we prefer arguing And, I've always just thought, I think my grandmother used to say this, that no one ever argued their way to happiness. And yet we live in this society and we live in a social media world where arguing gets glorified. Like you can go dunk on someone on social media and get 100 likes and everyone pats you on the back and you're like, oh, damn, that was productive for me. I got this huge dopamine hit out of dunking on the mooch on Twitter. That was great. I got to go do that again. Now I'm going to go do that to not just the mooch. I'm going to go do that to Sahil. I'm going to go do that to, to our friend Dan. I'm going to go do that to whoever. Like I'm going to go start dunking on people because I'm getting patted on the back when I go and do that. And it just perpetuates this cycle of behavior that is just like, it's ridiculous, right? Mike Tyson said in this really funny line, he said, social media has made y'all way too comfortable with disrespecting someone and not getting punched in the face for it. And it's so damn true when you think about it. Like how many of those people that will dunk on you on social media would actually say it to your face?
Village idiot became the global village idiot. But I do think Elon Musk is right about the freedom of speech. I don't understand why we had to take all these people off of social network. I would rather fight these people in the free marketplace of ideas, let them say whatever they want to say anonymously from their keyboard. And so this way people feel plugged into the society. When you're taking people off the network, you're deplugging them. And I think that form of deplatforming makes people feel like they're being left out. And you listen, I experienced this with the Trump world. Yeah. There's a good 20% of the United States that feels left out. They are mad at the establishment. They're mad at social media. They're mad at the medical establishment, the political establishment, et cetera. And I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves, not trying to figure out a way to reconnect them. You bring up a good point about the tribalism. And so the movie that DiCaprio was in last December, it was called Don't Look Up. He was in it with Jennifer Lawrence. Okay. Do you remember the movie? Did you see it?
Yep.
And so just for viewers and listeners that didn't see it, it was a satire about our contemporary world where it's become clear to a group of astrophysicists that a meteor is about to hit, which will be as damaging as the one that struck the Yucatan Peninsula that wiped out the dinosaurs. And yet we can't engage ourselves through our tribalism and our craziness. We can't get it together to solve for the global crisis. So you think that parody, that satire is a likely outcome?
I do, sadly. And I think like all of these satires hold a seed of truth. And I think that one, I mean, like 1984, right? I'm rereading 1984 again right now. It's a book that I tend to reread once a year. I saw it on Lex Fridman's reading list as his first book he was going to read this year, which, by the way, everyone started dunking on Lex for this reading list, which I found ironic as well. But I read 1984 again. I just finished it today. And that's it's another piece of content that you read and you say like, holy shit, when you're reading it. This is terrifying because it's satire, whatever you want to call it. It has these seeds of truth that are almost painful to read when you feel like, oh my, like they have a connection to what could actually occur and what could happen. And I watched that movie on Netflix. I did feel like there wasn't that unreasonable a set of situations there of something that could happen. There was obviously comedy and dramatization around it, but the general set of circumstances wouldn't shock me. If an alien invasion came and we started squabbling over stupid shit that didn't have to do with survival and extinction, I wouldn't be shocked.
Well, you're bringing up 1984. And so obviously, Orwell said that the source for 1984 was actually Mein Kampf. And it was also his observations of Joseph Goebbels, who, people that don't remember, he was the minister of information. He was the perpetrator of the big lie. He's famous for a lot of different quotations, but the one that's probably more famous, and I'm paraphrasing, is that it's not enough to just lie in a small way. It's the bigger the lie is, the more believable it will become to the population. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but Orwell understood that. So that allegory was trying to force people that are democratically minded to recognize that their democracy, which creates this wonderful decentralization, gives them their individual liberty and gives them their freedom. Mm-hmm. Yet we have a tendency to sometimes forget that, which is why some countries, Italy, Germany, they go wayward, they go into dictatorship. They think that's a faster, quicker way to solve economic solutions, economic issues. But then what ends up happening is because the power is so corrupting, you get your economic freedom taken away. And then unless you're currying favor with the leadership, you sort of lose everything. So how do you refresh the American experiment? How do you get people back on the idea that a couple hundred years ago, a group of people got together and said, okay, we want to create a flat, decentralized government with lots of checks and balances, protect ourselves from tyranny, which will ultimately lead to great prosperity for many, many people. This great experiment, what Lincoln called the last best hope for mankind. How do you hit the refresh button? How do you get the education into the system where people actually believe that what Cicero said? What did Cicero say? He said, we are slaves to the law in order to be free. We have to subordinate ourselves to the rule of law, not the rule of man, a Putinistic or Hitleristic idea, but to subordinate ourselves. How do we refresh that, Sahil?
For me, there are three things that would go a long way to help. And the first one is the rise of a third party within the United States. That's a viable third party, middle ground party. The second one is clear term limits on everyone that's engaged in government. And the third one would be campaign finance reform and getting rid of all of these special interests and all of these loopholes that allow people to be controlled by money. I think term limits would help with that to some extent because you wouldn't have this desire to accumulate power over long periods of time. But you go back to the earliest roots of the country, there was never a desire for there to be a career politician.
Right.
It's called public service. You'd go leave industry for a few years and go serve your country. And this whole idea now that you can have a cushy gig as a career politician and then leave, after your 30-year run and make $10 million a year, due to your political connections, et cetera, is absolutely ludicrous to me. And it's harmful to the country. And so I think that really having very, very clear term limits in place, I think people should demand this, by the way. The government is never going to do it because it's not in their interest. All the people are making money. They're riding the gravy train. They love it. It's awesome. And so I think it has to come from the people. That's why I think the third party is important, because it has to rise, around this middle ground that's very, logic oriented and not sensationalist, et cetera, not looking for the viral, tweet or TikTok video or soundbite that they're all currently looking for, to rise in the middle and then to push these things, to push the fact that you shouldn't be allowed to be serving in government for more than 4 to 6 years, 4 years, whatever it might be. And as a result of that, no longer, need to feel like you're accumulating power, that you have to bow down and kiss the ring of a certain, faction within the government because of them not then voting for your next bill. I mean, I have a friend who works on the Hill, and his party member, when he went to Washington and had their first vote, and he was going to vote no on this thing. And the head of their party came and said, the person working for the head of the party came and said, no, you're voting yes on that. And he said, oh, I'm going to vote no. It's aligned with my, my overall values. And they said, if you vote no on this, you're never going to get your name on a bill the entire time you're in Congress. And imagine that, right? Like, you go run on something, on your principles and values, people vote you into office, you get there and you're going to go vote on those values, which is what people have elected you to do. And you get told that you actually can't do that because you don't get in line. You're going to have a whole really tough time here for the next however long you want to be a part of this thing. And because you know that you might be a part of this thing for the next 20, 30 years, that matters. If you're only going to be a part of it for the next 2 to 4, the next 4, 6, whatever it is, you might not care. You might say, screw off.
You're in a club. You have to play by the club's rules. If you don't play by the club's rules, they'll ostracize you. You also know, you mentioned people leaving making $10 million a year. How about the people making $10 million a year staying?
Trading?
Yeah, because they're trading, and that was exposed about 12 years ago. Peter Schweitzer wrote a book about it. It got exposed. 60 Minutes did a big expose on it. And they then passed a rule that there would no longer be any insider trading. And then when nobody was looking, wasn't even a floor vote. They did it over a conference call. They reinstated it. And why did they do that? Because that's one of their big sources of income. They see what bills are coming. and say, okay, that's going to help this pharmaceutical company or that's going to help that company. And so it just speaks to that the system is too flawed. I was in Washington and said something which, was probably one of the reasons why I got ejected so quickly from Washington. I was like, what if we just pay these people? If I said to you, we were going to pay the Congress $20 million in after-tax money a year. And to your point about term limits, we can debate those, but let's say you could be in the House for 6 years. You could be in the Senate for one term, 6 years. But here's the deal. If you can all get together and balance the budget, the U.S. government will give each of you $20 million of after-tax cash.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No more insider trading, no more shenanigans. All you got to do is balance the budget. You get $20 million of after-tax cash. That would cost the Treasury $10.4 billion, which is a rounding error.
Rounding error. Yeah.
You know how many people would be signing up for that job and competing for that job and qualified people? And you know how quickly the budget would get balanced? My point is that we've obscured the incentives. We've misaligned the incentives so dramatically now that the system has become a negative feedback loop of cynicism. We have to reboot the system. No constitutional amendment in 30 plus years. Last major amendment 56 years ago with the Civil Rights Voting Act. Yet there's 27 amendments. So if you look, we've had an amendment every 9 years. Yet in the last 55 years, we've only had one significant amendment. So, we're failing the society and we're failing our next generation by not rebooting. The reason why there are amendments is the same reason why your iPhone needs to be upgraded or your computer. We have to recreate the system for a next generation of leaders and a next generation of people that aspire to freedom.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do about
really well
this?
said.
What are you going to do about this? Because my generation, sucks. I mean, let's just be honest. Okay, the baby boomers, I'm the last vestige of the baby boomers. We suck. We overpromised. We overspent. We underdelivered in terms of a political group of people. We racked up $25 trillion of debt in 14 years. So let's just go over that. George Washington to George W. Bush, $7 trillion of debt. Barack Obama into Donald Trump, out to Joe Biden, $25 trillion of debt. I mean, what are we doing? I mean, sort of bizarre. So go ahead. How are you going to fix it, Sawhill? How are you going to put your philosophical mind to that problem?
Well, I think it comes down to the incentives, as you said. I thought the way you framed it actually was really brilliant. It's like the Charlie Munger quote of show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. The fact that we pay these people so little and that it's no longer a desirable job. I mean, when I was a kid, and even when I went to college, I studied public policy. I did my master's in public policy under Condoleezza Rice. She was my advisor at Stanford. And at the time, I really thought I wanted to go into politics at some point in my life. I thought maybe, I'd run for governor at some point in my life or run for Congress, et cetera. And, over the last 8 years, that's been completely wiped out of my mind as a potential path that I want to go down because I've seen how bad the mudslinging is. I've seen, how rough of a path it is. I've seen what the sausage making actually looks like via friends that have gone down that path. And it's no longer, I think, a career path that attracts people that you'd want to be serving in those roles. And that's really sad. And that's something that's just going to be self-perpetuating unless we make a change. So I think people proposing the type of things that you're proposing, which on paper sound radical when you say them, and then you kind of take a second, digest them a bit, and realize, maybe there's actually really something to that. Maybe there's a middle ground here. Maybe there's something we can all agree on, is really important. And as I said, it's not going to come from the inside because the gravy train's rolling and those people don't want to get off it. They're happy. They're eventually going to die off because it's really old. I don't know what the average age of Congress is today, but it's super freaking old. But there needs to be a change and there needs to be a lot more youth that comes into Congress. Could I see myself eventually going down a path later in life? Sure. But something would really have to change. And I think a third party would really have to rise for it to be more attractive.
Well, it's going to be very hard to have a third party. What killed the third party in our country was Ross Perot. Once Ross Perot ran in 92, got 19.9 million votes, scared the lights out of both the Democrats and the Republicans. They closed rank and they tightened legally the duopoly. They made it almost impossible for a third party to rise. If you don't believe me, you can ask Andrew Yang about how difficult it is to start and formalize a third party in a country like ours.
You should have him on an episode of this. It'd be really interesting.
No. I like Andrew, and he'll be on, and he's written a very good book about this stuff. He's a very smart guy. All right, let's go to you. Let's go to you as a human being. Okay, let's open you up a little bit. What's your biggest insecurity? Mine at this point in my life is my man boobs. Let's just talk about that. Okay, so I just had shoulder surgery, probably need breast reduction at this point, but I'm going to be working on my man boobs in 2023. What is your biggest insecurity?
My biggest insecurity is that I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Excuse my language again, I suppose. If my mom's listening to this, I'll have to shoot her an apology text. I constantly feel like I have no clue what I'm doing at a lot of points of time. I was marching down a path in my prior job where I always knew what I was doing because there was a very clear title to it and there was a very clear progression to it. And I knew where I was going to be in 5-10 years. I was going to be a partner and I was going to be an MD, whatever. I knew exactly what it looked like. And today I don't have that. If I go to a cocktail party and someone asks, "Hey, what do you do?" The classic question, I don't really know. I can't really put it into a nice little 2-sentence soundbite like everyone else can. And that makes me insecure. It's kind of stupid because I'm working on a lot of really cool things and I'm impacting people's lives and I'm making more money than I could have imagined making, in my prior job, but I don't really know what I'm doing. And that bothers me. And I would say, it's an insecurity that I don't know how it manifests itself today, but it's certainly something I feel pretty regularly. And I've had insecurities my entire life about different things. Like when I was.
Well, what are some of your other insecurities?
I mean, I would say when I was a kid and when I was a lot younger, I was just generally pretty insecure about how I kind of like fit in. I come from a mixed race background. I'm half Indian. My mom's from India. My dad's white, Jewish from the Bronx. And I really struggled with figuring out where I fit in the world. Was I brown or was I white? Was I a nerd, like my mom wanted me to be, or was I a jock, like my dad maybe wanted me to be? Was I a nice guy or was I a bully? I really couldn't figure out my path. And that insecurity manifested itself as just like bad behavior and puffing myself up, bragging, like lying, saying things about myself that just weren't true, not being honest. Like just in high school, I think about the type of person I was and the type of things I was into and doing. And it was all because of insecurity and not just being comfortable with who I was and who I was becoming.
Talk about the spotlight effect. You talk about and explain how we overestimate the degree to which other people notice our actions.
Yeah, I mean, this really powerful effect once you realize it. Basically, we go around life thinking that everyone's staring at us. It's like in high school, you spill something on your shirt. You basically think that everyone's laughing at you the entire day. You're just like, you're sitting in class and you're thinking about how everyone's staring at you. Or now as an adult, you're at a bar by yourself. God forbid, your friend hasn't arrived yet. And you feel like everyone's staring and laughing at you. And the reality is no one is paying attention to you. We think that we are the center of the entire universe because that's how we perceive life. And so when we have these situations happening, we think that everyone is focused on us and staring at us and that the person laughing in the corner is laughing at us. The reality is everybody is just focused on themselves and no one is thinking about you as much as you are. So really the net result of that is just do you. Like do your thing and stop worrying about what everyone else is thinking along the way, because the reality is they're probably not even thinking about you.
Okay, so I've experienced that, and by the way, this is something that Trump once said to me. He said he had horrible things written about him in the 80s and the 90s, and lo and behold, nobody cares. Okay, I have a money manager friend that got lit up in 2006. I'm not going to mention his name, but nobody remembers that. He's a multi-billionaire. He paid a fine to the SEC in 2006. Nobody remembers it. Okay. And the point being is it almost destroyed him. I have a buddy of mine that got bamboozled in WorldCom. Got bamboozled. And he lost his money and he's still mad about it. He still thinks that people are staring at him with embarrassment. I got creamed by Sam Bankman-Fried. That was 2 months ago. I've already moved on from it. I've already dusted myself off, don't care. But I've also been under threat of cancellation for most of my life. And I've had friends of mine that have been fired from jobs, or they feel like they got a bad story written about them in the press, and they think it's that big of a deal. The truth of the matter is, nobody gives a what.
Yeah.
Okay. And
so
why does nobody care? I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you.
Well,
why does nobody care?
There's two things I would say here. The first one is a great piece of advice that I got from my grandfather when I had something bad happen when I was a kid, which was, today's news is used to wrap tomorrow's fish. And I always thought that was such a good saying, and one that I will repeat to my son at some point in my life, which is, when you're going through a bad time, or you have some bad press, or something bad hits, or you're getting canceled, or whatever it is, there's always the next day, and there's some new person that's having that happen to them, and people move on. And so when you're going through a hard time, remembering that today's news, the thing that everyone's writing about you, is literally going to be used to wrap tomorrow's fish, is a powerful realization. Because it is really true, right? Like your friend that blew up, no one's writing articles on it anymore. People move on. And so unless, obviously, like if you're going to jail and there's things bad that are happening and the ramifications continue, that's separate. Like Sam Bankman-Fried, today's news may be used to wrap tomorrow's fish, but today's news is sending him to jail. And that's going to be an issue for him. So
honestly, you got to live your life with integrity. Somebody asked me yesterday, well, you had a bad year, so what are you going to happen to Skybridge? I don't know what's going to happen to Skybridge, but I live my life with integrity. Somebody will come knocking on this door, or I'll knock on their door, and we'll come up with something together that is a really cool thing. Okay. And we'll see what that is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I just think, like, look, if you're operating within the context of your set of values that you believe in and that are true to you, then there's no need to worry about what other people think. There's a thing in America, and in the world probably now, but there is a thing in America that people love cheering for you on the way up. We love the hero's rise. It's amazing. You see all the Forbes articles about Sam Bankman-Fried on the way up. Oh, he's the wonder kid, all this stuff. But one thing that people in America love even more than the hero's rise is the fall. And people love, it was in Billions, I think Paul Giamatti said it, of like, people are cheering now, but they are dying to boo. And it's a sad thing, but it's a very, very true thing, is that whenever people are clapping for you on the way up, just know that that same person is going to be booing you on the way down once you turn the other way. And if you're comfortable with that, and then you're ready to be in the arena, because that's the reality, is like, the arena is a lonely place. If you're going to put yourself out there, you have to be comfortable with the fact that those people in the stands are cheering for you. The second you turn, they're going to be booing, and you got to be able to roll with it.
Coming to the end of this very fun interview for me. So I'm going to hit you with a few things. Okay, you ready?
All right. Yeah.
And these are rapid fire. I'm going to say a word. I need to get your raw shot test reaction. Ready? Time.
Precious.
Okay. Perspective.
Important.
Luck.
Engineerable.
Rejection.
Crucial.
Confidence.
Overrated.
Okay. Let me ask you this. These are good reactions. Okay. Do you ever really know yourself? You're seeking to know yourself, but why is it?
Why is it that you seek to know yourself?
First of all, a third of yourself is asleep. So, I mean, you're not really living in that world. So why is it?
The only constant is change. And I think the whole idea of knowing yourself is a flawed idea, because you're constantly changing. And the whole concept of, all of a sudden I know myself. Well, you shouldn't, actually. You should have changed. By the time you figure out yourself from yesterday, you should be some totally new person. You figured out something new, some new idea. That's a concept from
General Aurelius. He said that the 5-year-old version of you has died. No longer there. It's a new version of you. Every passing moment, you're in systematic change. But I think that the most important critical thing for me is I don't know myself. The Oracle of Delphi said, know thyself. You do the best you can to know yourself with great humility, but you don't know yourself, and you have to embrace the unknowable of self. How about that? All
I
right.
like
So,
that.
so let's go to your Friday 5 newsletter, which is an awesome newsletter. For our listeners here, where can they subscribe to that?
My website is probably the best place, sahobloom.com. It's just my first name, last name. And then obviously you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever things are out there.
You know who owns scaramucciSucks.com? You know who owns that?
No.
That would be me. I bought that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I said, fucking.
You're a smart guy, man. I should
Yes,
go buy that. I should go buy sahobloomsucks.com. That's smart.
Go buy that like tonight. Okay. Because
And reroute it to your
you're
newsletter.
going to continue to be successful. And what comes with success is a tremendous amount of haters. So, I think, why not let me take that one off the table for these people. Hey, listen, you're an awesome guy. I wish you nothing but great success. And congratulations on your baby. And I look forward to having you back on Open Book. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for all your support.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci. Today, we're flipping the script. It's Q&A time, and I got all the questions right here. You guys sent me some great questions. I've done my homework. I've given it some thought. I'm going to give it to you straight. So let's go right into it. These are coming from YouTube, and I love these names, which I always butcher, but this is Dustagirly 9398. When did you ever believe Donald Trump is impressive in any fashion other than being a complete grifter? He displays no intellectual curiosity, no desire to learn, and operates purely from the position of a narcissist. Okay, so Dustagirly, you've just described almost every politician in America, possibly every politician in the world, and who knows about our historical politicians because I haven't met any of those. But the truth be told, when you're in politics, you're actually searching for the lesser of the two evils. You're not really looking for the genius, if you will. And so the bad news for all of us is it was Jeb Bush or Donald Trump. I chose Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush lost to Donald Trump. And as a loyal Republican, I decided to stay in there and go work for Trump. That was a mistake. I have to own it for the rest of my life. So saying that I ever believed that he was anything other than what he is, no. That's not the case. And that's something I have to own. And that's one of the weird things, one of the worst things about going into politics. If you go into politics and you are a candidate for a political office, you are going to lie. I don't want to mention some of my friends that have gone into politics who were great guys, business executives, and then they get to the podium and they start telling lies. And I'm looking at them like, oh my God, but that's what happens. And one last point. Historical reference, Dwight Eisenhower, considered one of our great presidents, great military leader. When asked, he was 79 years old. He was at his house in Gettysburg, and Walter Cronkite went to interview him. He had left the presidency now, turned it over to John Kennedy. They said, General, and again, he wanted to be referred to as General, not President when he left. He said, General, what did you like or hate about the job? He said, well, I hated the lying. And so, yeah, I'm sorry about all that. It does suck, but that's the true answer. So let's go to the next one. What are your favorite tunes to play on those guitars in your office? Do you play songs or noodle around? And are you blasting the office on amp or keeping your volume at a reasonable level? This is Don Decay. So I have one phenomenal musician in my family, which is my daughter, Amelia. She can play those guitars and she can sing beautifully and has been on stage with people like Andrea Bocelli, but not me. I am tone deaf, never played a musical instrument. Those guitars were gifts to me from Maroon 5 and Lenny Kravitz and John Fogerty, all of which have played at our conferences. And so I like displaying them because they're good discussion pieces, as evidenced by the fact that you brought this up in our Q&A. So yeah, no, I'm tone deaf, can't sing. And when I start singing, there's not one person in the Scaramucci family that doesn't tell me to shut the you-know-what up. All right, number 3, is there a tipping point where you would leave the U.S. for the sake of your family's safety? This is El Ray 8E876. So I'm assuming that's August 8th, 1976, El Ray. So happy birthday. That's coming up. I guess the answer to that is no. I'm an American and I'm a New Yorker and I'm not leaving. Okay, and we'll stay as long as we can, and hopefully we can get these people out of office and we get more people in office that want to generally do the right thing. So I'm never leaving. Number 4, have you considered running for office? I have considered running for office. This is from Beverly Malloy, but my wife believes in castration, and you probably don't know this about me, Beverly, or maybe you do. I'm running for re-election in my marriage, and I just think it's really hard on kids. And then go back to question number 1. If you go into political life, you end up becoming a huge liar. And so, no, I haven't really overly considered running for office, but maybe someday, you never know. Is America still the land of opportunity, or should a young person consider living elsewhere? What a great question. I think America is still the land of opportunity, but I will say this to you guys, that America has made it more difficult for people like me, in the sense that where I grew up from, I have found that more people that grow up in what I would call the working class areas of America, the blue collar middle class, if you will, have a harder time with class mobility today. But I do think it's still a great land of opportunity. And there's some things we can do to change that. And America is this really wonderful, adaptive place. So I'm going to say it's still a land of opportunity, a little tougher today than it was 40 or 50 years ago. But I still think there's no place like America. Most people that live from around the world in indigent circumstances want to come to America and give it a shot. So I still think that that's true today. Number 6, when looking at the threats to democracy posed by the Trump administration, how much do you believe in the fears over such threats, and are they justified or overblown? Or put it in other words, how likely will it be for democracy as we know it to survive beyond the Trump administration? So the democracy is under tremendous stress. And by the way, this is not necessarily Trump's fault. The democracy's been under stress for the last 30 or so years. And what the Democrats and the Republicans basically did is they joined forces to tighten their duopoly on the democracy. And then they've done something called gerrymandering. And just put simply, they're able to go and redistrict their congressional districts in a way that favor them. So they can screen their enemies out of the district and they can bring their friends into the district so that they can stay in office. And so that's really harmed the democracy. So there's a lot of things that are going on that have harmed the democracy prior to Trump. Trump is a manifestation of this. I do believe that if you had another candidate, Chump or Rump, they would be doing many of the same things that Trump is doing. There's a large group of people in our country, unfortunately, that don't believe in democracy anymore. And this is a terrible thing. And I'm just going to bring up a quick story here before we go to another question. If you get a chance, please go watch the movie The Remains of the Day. It's a 30-plus-year-old movie. Anthony Hopkins won the Academy Award for this movie. There's just a great scene in the movie. He's a very uptight butler. He's serving the Lord of the Manor, and he's doing it in a very proper way. But he's an uneducated man, and one of the aristocrats in the brandy snifting room looks at him and starts asking him these complicated questions about politics. And Hopkins, as the butler, looks at him and says, I don't know, sir. And as he leaves the room, the man looks over at the owner of the manor and he said, well, why do we give these guys the vote if they don't know anything? And yet, at the same time that they're doing this contemporaneous, they're bringing the Nazis into the front door to have a dinner with them. So there's an implication in the story that the smart, quote unquote, smart aristocrats, they don't know any better than the people that don't know anything, right? And the idea is that we need each other. There's sometimes a collective wisdom in crowds that we need each other to sort of modify and mollify some of the extreme behaviors out there. So I'm a big believer in the democracy. The democracy needs to be reset. I do think it will survive Trump because of the courts and because of very strong lobbying that goes on here. So the democracy needs to be revitalized, probably need amendments to our Constitution. We need a group of secular leaders to come in and analyze it and say, okay, here's how we can strengthen the democracy and stop the nonsense of thinking that one group of people is better than another group of people because of wealth or education. Churchill said it better than anybody. Democracy is the worst form of government until we compare it to all the other forms of government. He was absolutely right about that. Number 7, what do you do when you go into a bookstore? How do you begin finding a book to read? This is from @Ian Soleil. So this is a phenomenal question. And so the first thing I do is, and this is the first thing I do with a newspaper, by the way, I like looking at the front page of a newspaper. And hold on, I have one right here. To me, the front page of the newspaper tells the story because somebody had to curate this front page. They had to make a decision of what was the most important things to have happen during the day. So for me, first thing I do when I'm in a bookstore is what is in the bookstore that's in the front of the store. What do the curators of that bookstore think is important? So they would look for the nonfiction, new nonfiction, and the new fiction. And I probably then will go to the history section and spend some time there. And then last but not least, I go over to the bookstore owner or the manager of the store and I say, what are other people buying. And I always ask for something off the grid. As an example, a couple of years back, I said, give me something that's fiction other people are buying or that I wouldn't necessarily buy. And I obviously knew the bookstore owner, and they gave me Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis, who I have interviewed, and she's a brilliant person. She got the Barnes & Noble Book of the Year. Had I not done that, I would have never been able to have read that book. The book became a Apple TV stream, phenomenal book. And I would recommend to you that you don't just stick to your own knitting in a bookstore, but you ask people what other people are reading, because that's how I always find something super new. And I'm reading this book right now called The Wealth Ladder by Nick Mangiuli. And I found that by somebody handing me the book. And so far, this is a terrific book on wealth, lots of common sense. Wouldn't have found it on my own. So ask people for help in a bookstore. Number 8, do you think agentic AI will hollow out white collar jobs, and to what level and how fast do you think that will happen? And is there a way to agent proof yourself to protect your future earnings, or are we all destined to subsist on UBI? This is from Dave Kadoff. So, again, these are phenomenal questions. I think we're a ways away from being super threatened by AI. I think that there's a lot of processes that will happen that we'll benefit from. There's a lot of computer programming that AI is capable of, and there's a lot of writing that AI is capable of. But ultimately, I think we're going to find ourselves in an AI-enabled world as opposed to an AI takeover. Now, that may not be true 50 years from now, but I'm really talking about the next 10 or 20 years. And I would just ask people to spend some time learning about AI and spend some time working with AI. I have subscriptions now to ChatGPT and to Super Grok. Just subscribe to Cloud, CLAUDE. And I think that Cloud is probably the best on the writing side. If you're a writer, pretty good at forming sentences in your own style. But I would use AI right now as a tool for learning more than a tool for analytics and doing, because you want to keep your brain sharp, basically. But I think we're 10, possibly even 15 years away from this being a super threat. But I do think if it's handled properly, we're going to enter a new age of abundance, probably end up with a 3 or 4 day work week down from 5. Okay, let's go to these LinkedIn questions. And guys, thank you for sending them. You oftentimes reflected on your own upbringing as a source of inspiration, determination, and resilience because you were taught to appreciate the sacrifice made by your parents to maintain a decent standard of living for the family. All of that is true. However, many come to finance, as we know it, from a world of privilege and acquire a certain sense of entitlement. This may be counterintuitive, but how would you suggest that people who are not brought up grounded acquire and maintain a sense of perspective to live lives and focus on the needs of others? This is Larry McGinty. I mean, this is again, these are great questions, but I got bad news for Larry. Okay, life is unfair. And Larry, you could grow up like me and become very, very rich and be a complete asshole. You can grow up like me and become very, very rich and be grounded and recognize that you're no better or worse than any other human being. And believe it or not, there are rich people that were born into excessive privilege that are incredibly kind and incredibly endearing people that have a lot of empathy. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any way to teach it. Sometimes when people get smashed to the ground, they can become more psychologically minded when they pick themselves back up. But generally, if you're an asshole without money, you become a super asshole when you have money. And if you're a good person without money, guess what? I think it's a force multiplier. When you end up having money, you end up doing good things with it. So not a great answer, sir. I do think I benefited from having hardworking people in my family give me some respect for the value of a dollar, but also give me some respect for the notion that we didn't have a lot, but it was important to work, which is why even though I've done pretty well as a person here in America, I still work my ass off, if you will, and will continue to do so for many years or after normal retirement. But this is a great question. How do you think the war with Russia and the Ukraine will end? This is George Page. Won't end. Won't end until 2028, possibly longer. I think it's going to just be a stalemated situation. The Europeans, with the help of the Pentagon, are going to continue to supply stalemate-like armament for this war. Could have ended, but we don't have a leader. The American president is obviously
kowtowing to Vladimir Putin. I believe that Putin has compromise on him. He's scared shit of Putin. And so this thing will not end, at least until well after this presidential term is over. Number 5, has your anti-Trump political stance caused redemptions for Skybridge? Yes. Yes, it has, PK Semler. My anti-Trump political stance has caused redemptions. You know what else caused redemptions? My pro-Trump political stance. And the immortal words of my son, AJ Scaramucci, Dad, you're killing me. Killing my networking, that the Republicans hate you because you left Trump. The Democrats hate you because you were once with Trump. You're just killing my networking opportunities. My son is absolutely right, but I am in search of the truth, PK, and people can leave if they want. Take a look at the performance. Take a careful look at our performance over the last 5 years before you leave. I think you'd be stupid to leave, but that's just my opinion. Okay, when building both a personal brand and a business brand, how do you strike the balance between staying authentic to who you are and still positioning each brand strategically to achieve your business goals? Have you found that there are times when the two conflict? And if so, how do you navigate that tension? This is from Marvin Tybout. This is these are great questions. Marvin, I've been absolutely terrible at this, by the way. So I wouldn't go by me. I am somebody that likes to share my opinion. I like being a public person, and my opinions piss people off. Michael Jordan had one of the best lines ever. They wanted him to champion some civil rights causes, and they wanted him to be positioned as liberal. And Jordan looked at everybody and said, hey, look, the Republicans buy sneakers too. Leave me alone. I'm not a politician. I want to stay out of politics. Most smart business leaders do that. I have taken the position that the country needs help, and the country needs some level of reform and healing. I don't want to be a rich guy living in a barbed-wired, security perimetered McMansion while my fellow neighbors are suffering and struggling. So this is why I like speaking out. I like trying to find ways to help people. But this has put me in a bad position business-wise. If I was a better brand manager and a better marketer strategically, I'd keep my mouth shut and just focus on my business. I'd probably be richer, but I don't think I'd be having as much fun. Let's keep going. What are your reading recommendations to undergrads looking to pursue a career like yours? Sebastian Montezuma de la Barrera. Okay, so Sebastian, couple things. I would read 3 books. One Up on Wall Street by Peter Lynch, The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, and I would read Lawrence Cunningham's The Essays and Writings of Warren Buffett, which are a compilation of what Mr. Buffett has written over the last 50 years. Start with those 3 things, and then, of course, pick up the Wall Street Journal. Try to read that every day. I think you'd be well ahead of most people. What is the best and worst career advice you've ever received? Saren Insafe. So the best career advice that I've received, which I didn't understand at the time, was from my first boss, who told me that I needed, quote unquote, a tincture of time, which basically meant that I needed to be patient, that I was too restless in wanting my career to unfold more quickly than it could actually unfold. In fact, to quote him, it takes 11 months to make an elephant. You can't instantaneously make an elephant. It takes 9 months to make a human baby, but it takes 11 months to make an elephant baby. Calm yourself down. That was the best advice. The worst advice was when I talked to people after I got fired from the White House. There were some crisis PR people that told me that, oh my God, you blew yourself up and you should go buy yourself a villa in Tuscany and disappear for 5 years. Why don't you come back to the United States sometime in 2022? That's not great advice, by the way. So anyway, I did not do that. And so that was the worst advice I got. Number 9, your thoughts on long-term risk on the U.S. economy, the dollar standing in 10 years from now. Jacob Osterberg, the dollar is still going to reign supreme 10 years from now, primarily because it's the strongest of the weakest fiat currencies. But Bitcoin will be worth a lot. Gold will be worth a lot in dollar denomination. The dollar will be less valuable in terms of its purchasing power because, unfortunately, the American politicians don't want to face the music with their deficit spending. And so what they're doing is they're using inflation as a form of regressive taxation. So again, never forget this. Deficit spending is unfunded tax liability. You're going to end up paying it one way or the other. You can either tax the people and pay it like they do in Norway, or you can not tax the people and you can take their wealth from them through inflating and monetizing the debt through gross inflation. But the dollar will be, I think, still reigning supreme, but it will be a weaker asset, which is why you should own some Bitcoin and gold and some other protective assets. Your memory and ability to recall things you've read is second to none. Is this just good genes, or do you do something to keep your memory strong, manage stress, etc.? Dmitry Balasov. So great question. So I do something. I'll teach you a trick that I do. Let's talk about this book. Talk about Nick's book for a second. When I am done with this book, I will take out a white piece of paper, like a Xerox piece of paper, or printer paper, and with a pen, I will write 5 things that I've learned from this book. And I may even put the page numbers, and then I open up the book and I put it in the front of the book. So now when want to draw upon this in a podcast or something, I'll have it on my shelf. I'll say, I remember reading something in Nick's book about that. What the hell was it? I'll pull it off the shelf. I'll open the book, and there are 5 things that I learned from the book with the page numbers and the annotation. So it's a little trick that I use to make people think that I have a better memory than I actually do. All right, let's keep going. These are great questions. What is your favorite political history book on the U.S. that you recommend? And this is from John Hearn. So to me, there are 2 books, actually, if you don't mind. One is called These Truths by Jill Lepore. She was a Tufts University historian, professor of history. Phenomenal book on the reality of American history as opposed to the hagiography of American history. And then the second book, which I really do try to read at least once every 5 years, is In the Time of the Americans by David Fromkin, which basically laid out for us what the American government did and great American leadership did in the end of the Second World War to build probably the architecture of the greatest peace and prosperity in global history, which unfortunately is now coming to an end. But anyway, those 2 books I think are phenomenal. You love Superman and superheroes. What superhero power do you wish you had, and what would you do with it? John Kelly. Okay, well, number 1, I would not want to be able to see the future. I think that would take a lot of fun out of life. So we'll leave that one off. Clairvoyance is not something I would like. I guess the superhero strength that I would like would be able to read people better than I currently have. So I would want super empathy is what I would want. I think that's something that I probably lacked a little bit of as a younger person. I think getting fired and blown out of the White House is probably maybe more psychologically minded and more empathetic, but I would like to have that super strength, if you will. 13. What's an achievement of yours that was monumental in shaping your career and driving you to the next level? This is William S. I can tell you exactly what it was, William S. February 6th, 1986. For those of you listening at home, that was Ronald Reagan's 75th birthday. February 6, 1986. That was the day that I got accepted to the Harvard Law School. Of course, my mom thought it was Harvard Law School. She didn't know any better, but that was a big moment because Harvard was a different perception 40 years ago. And Harvard, to me, was a ticket to the white-collar communities. It was an opportunity for me to get a really good white-collar job, having grown up in a family of people that never had a white-collar job. And so that was the big achievement. All right, so that's a wrap for right now for these questions. Guys, thank you very much. This is the Q&A session for Open Book. Please continue to send questions, and we'll do more of these. People want them, we'll keep doing them.